which is why he
Not
got the
good.
name. Yeah, not good.
It is good. It's good for a cat, but, not
yeah,
for the...
No. Yeah, we've made the call that when horse passes, that will be the end of our cat
ownership.
time.
All right.
No, yes, Gareth Morgan will be pleased.
Amy Carter, thank you so much for joining us on the panel this afternoon.
Thank
And
you. It's been my pleasure.
Phil Taylor, thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Karen.
That's the panel for Tuesday, I believe it is, the 6th of September. Lisa Owen's got Checkpoint next.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, the government earmarks $53 million for youth programs as crimes committed by under-13s in Auckland skyrocket on its watch. Havelock North Police mistake a body in a burnt-out car for animal remains. Flood-damaged State Highway 1 in the far north could be closed for months, so we road test the detour. The gold-plated golden years, how much do you think it costs to live a good life in retirement? And a debate about how to properly use your car handbrake. Yep, it's a thing, and it's got people revved up. We'll have more on that. Don't forget, you can watch us live on Freeview Channel 50, Sky Channel 83, and Facebook.
RNZ News at 5. Ahimarie, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. A Havelock North resident says she looked around a burned-out car without realising a body was inside. Hawke's Bay Police were notified about the vehicle, which was parked at a popular walking area on Saturday morning. But officers also didn't realise a body was inside until an inspection took place on Monday. Linda Jacobson says she and her daughter saw a police sticker on the car saying it didn't need to be reported.
We started to sort of go over close, and then I jokingly said to my daughter, I don't think I want to look inside just in case there's a body or something like that.
Police say the investigation's still in the very early stages. A post-mortem is expected to be carried out on the body today. An Auckland Youth Service says it's resorted to trawling malls, streets and social media to find those at risk of joining gangs and committing crime. The government today announced a $53 million package extending education and employment programs to thousands of young Aucklanders. Taumaki Makaurau saw a 24% increase in crime committed by under-13s last year. Te Reretai Hauiti of Mā Te Huruhuru Charitable Trust suggests it's easier than ever to find at-risk young people.
You can just go to Manukau Mall, you can just walk around South Mall, and most times they're just on social media, and that's where we do a lot of our campaigning, a lot of our referrals, our drive for our programs.
While education and employment remain key measures of success, Mr. Hauiti says sometimes just changing someone's mindset is a win. You can hear more on this story in Checkpoint shortly. The defence lawyer for a business person at the centre of a political donations trial has told a court his client didn't conceal his identity, as the Crown alleges. 7 people are defending charges laid by the Serious Fraud Office in the High Court at Auckland. The Crown claims 3 large donations to National and Labour were split to avoid triggering the disclosure limit and keep the public in the dark about the identity of the donor businessman Jung Equin. Mr. Jung's lawyer, Blair Kewen, told the court his client didn't conceal his identity.
He is not a criminal. He's not a fraudster. He's not a cheat. He hasn't engaged in deceitful behaviour. He hasn't tried to conceal his identity from anyone. He hasn't sought to hide from the authorities. He hasn't sought to hide from the public in any way.
The Crown closed its case yesterday. Roads around the south have reopened after a polar blast that brought snow and ice to the lower South Island. Dangerous conditions closed several state highways around Dunedin overnight and this morning. Local roads were also closed in the city. While cold conditions remain, the snow has now mostly gone and roads have reopened. In the North Island, both State Highway 5 between Napier and Taupo and the Desert Road have reopened, but extra care is recommended. Part of the Desert Road has a 30 km/h speed restriction due to a washout. And 2 sailors who left New Zealand shores for Australia have been stranded in the Tasman Sea for 36 hours. A rescue is underway to save the pair, who are currently about 305 kilometres east of Lord Howe Island. John T. Dine reports.
The alarm was raised by a family member early yesterday after the vessel encountered severe weather, was taking on water and sustained damage to its steering. An emergency beacon was activated about 2 hours later. The Australian Maritime Safety Authority has been coordinating the rescue with the Royal Australian Air Force and New South Wales Police. The men are believed to be in their 70s and are experienced sailors.
In sport, Australia have won the toss and put New Zealand into bat in the opening Chapel Hadley One-Day Cricket International in Cairns. A short time ago, the Black Caps were 1 wicket down for 26 runs. Veteran pace bowler Tim Southee has been left out of the starting 11, with Matt Henry selected in his place. New Zealand have never won a one-day series in Australia. Their last one-day win there was 13 years ago. Rafa Nadal is making no excuses after his shock loss to American Francis Tiafoe in the US Open 4th round. Despite an injury-hampered build-up, the second seed acknowledges he was outplayed by Tiafoe in New York. Nadal, who was chasing his 23rd Grand Slam title, says complaining about his situation wouldn't have changed the result.
I played a bad match and he played a good match. I was not able to hold a high level of tennis for a long time. I was not enough quick on my movements, and he was able to take the ball too many times very early, so I was not able to push him back.
Tiafoe moves on to his first quarter-final of a major since the 2019 Australian Open. And WBC heavyweight boxing champion Tyson Fury wants a Battle of Britain this year with Anthony Joshua. Fury's looking for an opponent after rival Alexander Usyk, the WBO, WBA and IBF champ, suggested he'll not return to the ring until 2023. Joshua was beaten by the Ukrainian in Saudi Arabia last month. That's the news.
Snow up north.
I'm sitting down in nature and I've just put the fire on. It's not very often that I put the fire on it. So yeah, she's a bit chilly this morning.
Snow down south.
First we had the rain, then we had the hail, then we had a small layer of snow still on top of it, and that's created some pretty icy and treacherous conditions underfoot.
And some possibly promising news for skiers.
The cold temperatures are going to rejuvenate even the snow base that we had, but with some fresh on top, it's going to help immensely.
Join us, whatever the weather, morning report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And you're on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. From Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Mainly fine, isolated showers are possible for Northland. From Waitomo to Horowhenua, including Taumaru Nui and Taupo. Fine today, partly cloudy tomorrow with a few showers. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Also Taihape, Kapiti and Wellington. Showers clearing this evening. Fine tomorrow, apart from occasional afternoon or evening showers for Taihape and Hawke's Bay. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine. A few showers developing tomorrow afternoon and evening south of Ashburton. Buller and Westland, fine. Isolated showers developing north of the glaciers this afternoon, clearing tomorrow evening. Otago, mainly fine. Showers in Clutha spreading elsewhere tomorrow afternoon. The snow levels rising to 700 metres. Southland and Fiordland, showers turning to rain for a time tomorrow morning. The snow level is lifting to 700 metres. And for Te Kohu, the Chatham Islands, showers. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I'll have headlines and traffic news for you at about 20 past 5.
Nā mihi eho, thanks Evie. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint i tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Youth crime in Auckland has been rising under the Labour government, bucking the national trend. Ram raids and smash and grabs have been happening seemingly every night across Auckland, leaving a trail of business owners counting the costs. In the last year, crimes carried out by people under 13 jumped 24% in Tamaki Makaurau. Today, the government unveiled its plan to curb youth crime with wraparound services. Our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Munro have the story.
In a quiet corner of West Auckland, Sam Somji runs us through the damage to his humble mobile service station. It's been months since it was last targeted, but the damage, physical, mental, financial, remains.
We are 4 months today, and the work has not even started. I'm just waiting for the work to start because as there are shortage of other things as well, the materials and the people who do the work. So I don't know how long we have to wait.
Sam and his family have been on the receiving end of 3 ram raid attacks.
While it is like this, the shop looks close. So we are losing on all sides actually.
In the latest effort, they made matchsticks out of his bollards before smashing through concrete blocks and steel bars and demolishing his front counter. Days of lost trading, weeks of emotional and physical recovery, the hardest months of Mr. Somji's career.
And I'm doing business in this country from close to 20 years. And I'm not feeling safe now.
In Tamaki Makaurau, this is simply normal. 436 ram raids last year alone, a 24% jump in proceedings against under-13s in the 12 months to July.
Kids as young as 7 are involved in smashing shop fronts and doing ram raids in cars, often stolen cars. That has to stop.
Now the government insists it is taking action. Referrals to the Social Wellbeing Board will now be extended to West Auckland, as will a youth guarantee program for 16 to 19-year-olds to get 1,100 more young people into courses free of charge.
These are all programs that are run in the community that have got proven results. We know they work, and we know that if we put a bit more support behind them, they can actually keep more young people out of trouble.
Te Reretai Hauiti is on the coalface when it comes to showing young people there is something more out there than a life of crime, than gangs and other pitfalls.
It's intergenerational connections within gang spaces, the Black Power, mongrel mob. We have a few in the tribesmen, gangs in that space too. So yeah, it's quite a wide range of just connections in the gang space and just youth offending, just their upbringings basically.
He's part of the team at Mate Huruhuru Youth Charitable Trust, which has used funding via the He Poutama Rangatahi scheme to run 4 cohorts of up to 25 taitamariki each. The government says the scheme will be extended to support another 1,400 young people.
Honestly, it's not hard to find them at all. You know, you can just go to Manukau Moor, you can just walk around Southmore, and most times they're just on social media, and that's where we do a lot of our campaigning, a lot of our referrals, our drive for our programs is through social media, through word of mouth, and just Auckland, we're not going to have a shortage of taitamariki that are in these predicaments within their life at the moment.
So what are the keys to keeping young Kiwis on the straight and narrow, out of cars being driven nightly into family businesses like Sam Somji's? For that, we leave the political announcements and head to the streets of Henderson.
Nowadays, any kind of kid could become troubled, you know what I mean? Because we've got mobile phones and that. Everyone's connected across a whole new level.
I've even stopped them catching the trains and stuff home from school now, so it's just kids just seem to be getting into too much trouble.
Most schools go, here's some information, read it, that's how you're going to learn, but obviously not everyone learns like that. So it's just making sure that you're engaging with the kids in ways that actually, work for them.
They think there's no other lifestyle out there except for that lifestyle, and I've seen it, and just having that arm out to say, hey, look, there's actually more options out there than just being this gangster.
Meanwhile, back at his battered service station, the likes of Sam Somji remain on the receiving end, still waiting for a fix and desperate for change.
And that report from our two next. The video version of that story will be on our web page. A little earlier, I spoke to the Police Minister, Chris Hipkins, and he explained the government hasn't set a hard target for these programs to reduce crimes, but it will be measuring success.
It's not about reducing prosecutions, it's about reducing offending. I want to get these kids off the street, into school, into education, into training, into employment, so that they're not getting into trouble in the first place. That's got to be the goal. I'm not going to put a hard and fast number on it. We know we can support thousands of kids with some of the lower levels of programs that we're talking about, so things like Youth Guarantee, which are about making sure they've got alternative pathways back into education. And then at the more intensive end, we're talking about hundreds of kids and families that we can support to actually kind of break that cycle.
So what is the actual tangible measure of success then?
Well, ultimately, we don't want to see ram raids. We don't want to see these young people out on the streets and getting into trouble. That's got to be the ultimate goal, and we do.
So you can't be aiming for zero, though, Minister, can you? So why not put a reduction on it? I mean, because if you want to be evidence-based, don't you need to know you've succeeded, and to do that, you need a target?
Look, we haven't got a target. We haven't set a numerical target. The goal here is to get these kids engaged in something constructive.
There has been a massive increase in police proceedings against young people, under 13-year-olds in Auckland. Why is that?
Well, we've seen an elevated level of offending in Auckland in recent times, and the police are taking proactive action against those young people. So you are seeing additional arrests and so on. What we're doing is we're acknowledging you've got to tackle this at both ends. You've got to basically have the police out there doing the job that we expect them to do, and they're doing that. But we've also got to be doing more as a country to reduce the pressure on police to do that by reducing the offending in the first place.
So it's about $53 million as a package that you announced today. I noticed that it's all reprioritised or redistributed money. So where's it come from?
In some cases, if you look at Youth Guarantee, for example, that program was being undersubscribed. So we've extended the eligibility for it and we've extended the level of support for it. So it was money that was...
So you weren't spending the money, Minister, in these programs?
No, that's right, because there was less demand than the funding available. And so we're doing things to increase the demand for those programs because we know we can reach a bigger number of young people and actually try and get them back into education if we change the program, and that's what we're doing.
How can there be a low level of demand when there is a high level of offending?
Well, if you take Youth Guarantee, for example, Youth Guarantee is a program that up until now has had an age limit. It's been capped, and we're extending the age limit right up to 25. And we're increasing the amount of pastoral care support, so the amount of money that goes into providing pastoral care support. It's a program that's targeted at kids who have left school with no qualifications and giving them alternative options for how they can gain foundation-level qualifications. And so by making the changes to eligibility, by making the changes to pastoral care support, we're encouraging those providers, so our polytechs, our private training establishments, our wānanga, to actually go out and more proactively identify these young people who are at risk, work with other community groups to identify who they are and get them back into a pathway into education.
Minister, I just want to talk about the, so-called Ram Raid Protection Fund, right, $6 million. Do you think it's working effectively? 5 businesses in Tamaki Makaurau have got assistance and the goal was about 500 premises. So why so slow?
Yeah, it certainly needs to accelerate, and the police are, I've been having conversations with the police about that.
What have you said to them, Minister?
I've said that it needs to move faster, and so they're putting more resources into getting those security assessments done so that it can move faster.
So have they been underperforming with this project?
With this particular project, I would have liked to have seen faster progress. I'm confident that we're going to see some faster progress in the next few weeks.
So they have been underperforming in your view?
Well, if you go back and you look at the original proposal, they indicated right at the beginning that September was when they expected to see it ramp up. Obviously it would have been, this was all put in place before I became the minister, but obviously I would have liked to have seen it ramp up a bit before now.
Minister, if you've told the police to get their skates on with this protection fund, have you given them a goal? Because you did say, when I say you, the government, 500 premises would probably be helped by this, only 5 that we know of so far. What have you told them about your expectations for acceleration?
I'm fully expecting to see the number of assessments done, which is the bit that police can control, really accelerate in the next few weeks. In terms of the follow-through from that, that's a bit more complicated because the police can't necessarily control that. So if they recommend, for example, security cameras, there are long wait times with some of the providers who install security cameras. So that's a market issue rather than police. Police can't necessarily control that. What they can control are the assessments and the advice to the businesses, and that's the bit that they're going to be really aiming to ramp up.
How many a week, do you know? Or have you discussed that with them?
It'll certainly increase into double. I'd like to see them into double digits on a daily basis in terms of the businesses that they're going in to see and to provide security assessments for, and I'm confident that they'll get to that.
So that was the Police Minister, Chris Hipkins there. Really keen for your feedback on this one, on the Crime Prevention Fund. So only 4 businesses helped so far. Is it moving fast enough? Do you have confidence in it? And 53 million allocated, and it's not new money, to these youth crime services, reallocated. Some of it was being underspent. Let us know your thoughts on that one. Text us 2101, or you can tweet us at checkpoint.rnz. The email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is 18 minutes after 5. Kia mau tunu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Settlements in the far north are feeling the pinch with the continued closure of State Highway 1. The road south of Kaitaia has been severely damaged and could be closed for months. More wild weather last night downed power lines close to the washed out section and added to road workers' woes as they try to reinstate the Mangamuka Gorge. The closure has drawn the ire of locals and it's ignited calls for more long-term government investment in Northland's roading infrastructure. Now, Katie Todd is in Kaitaia and she joins me now. Kia ora, Katie. You took the long way around, the detour. How was that?
Kia ora. Yes, we took State Highway 10, which is the official detour up the east coast of the far north. It's beautiful. It is an absolutely stunning drive for a tourist, lovely white sand beaches and blue seas. However, it's not quite cut out for trucks and a lot more traffic. That's the message from locals, at least, who say that there needs to be faster progress on the Mangamuka Gorge. They're worried about damage to the road surface and just a lot more time getting anywhere south at the moment.
Yeah, so what is the latest with the road closures?
Well, look, it's about 2.5 weeks since the Mangamuka Gorge first closed. As recent as a few days ago, we still heard that the ground was moving in that gorge. There's about 15 slips in total, according to Waka Kotahi. They're doing what's called geotechnical assessments of the area at the moment, and we're expecting an update from them later in the week. But the impact here in Kaitaia is actually being felt by locals. I've been walking around talking to some businesses here and hearing the stories of people that are feeling the pinch at the moment. And so, look, I'll introduce you here to Twyla, and she is from Tai Tokoro Honey. Now, Twyla, you were telling me that the process of moving honey and accessing the hives is a little bit more difficult at the moment.
Yes, so with State Highway 1 being closed, we obviously are told to take State Highway 10, and that can add anything from 40 minutes to an hour to our journeys. Most of our beekeepers operate with just utes for their daily trips, but when we're transporting hives and honey, we end up using heavy trucks, so 8-wheelers and the likes, and that can add on a lot of time to our drive hours.
And you also help to run Ahipara horse treks. Now that's a tourist business. What have you seen in terms of the tourist numbers?
Well, they've been pretty low since COVID, but with the Mangamukas being closed again, we haven't seen a return of tourists to the area. And so obviously a lot of businesses are feeling the pinch. We're just not getting people to visit, and trying to convince them to come north of Paihia is hard enough on a great day, let alone with the state of our roads at the moment. It's not really safe and it's not enjoyable for a lot of people.
Right, so you heard it there, and it's not just Kaitaia. Look, we've heard the same message from other locals, some from Mangamuka itself. Look, we'll have more on this for you tomorrow.
Thanks, Katie. That's Katie Todd joining us from Kaitaia there. She got there by taking the detour. It is 21 after 5 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. And coming up, we'll talk sport, but homai o whakaaro. We would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program so far. If you are in the far north, if you're in business, let us know what the closure of State Highway 1 at the Mangamukas means for you. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Our email address is checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. Time to go to the headlines now. Anei a iwi mina pita pita kōrero.
National claims the government's package to tackle youth crime by steering young people toward educational training is just window dressing. Labour's introducing a Better Pathways package aiming to place more young people in education, training or work to drive down youth crime. But National says it fails to impose meaningful consequences on serious repeat youth offenders. Havelock North residents are describing how they saw a burned-out car on a popular walking and cycling track, but many didn't realise a body was inside. The police were notified of the wreckage on Saturday, but it wasn't until an inspection on Monday that they found the human remains. A father from the Gloriavale commune has told the employment court about a harrowing conversation he had with the community's founder. Clem Reedy said a hopeful Christian told him that he could take comfort from the fact his dead daughter wouldn't be molested. Mr. Reedy said the West Coast community's leaders used their powerful position to cover up sexual offending. And a new report suggests a couple retiring in a city needs $750,000 in the bank to enjoy all the little extras in their golden years. The Massey University Retirement Expenditure Guidelines point to inflation as the main reason people on super alone struggle. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in Wellington State Highway 2 at Lower Hutt northbound. About 20 minutes ago, a crash was cleared after the off-ramp at Major Drive. There may be residual queues though. And further north, fallen trees have closed State Highway 30 at Rotomā in the Bay of Plenty between Rotorua and Whakatane. I will have more headlines and any other traffic news at about 40 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Evie. Just wiping the tears away when I hear how much you need to retire. But before you go, I have a question. It's about cars. Do you drive a manual or an automatic?
Automatic.
Automatic. When is the right time to, and how do you use the handbrake properly when you park? This is cryptic, but it'll make sense later in the program.
Now I'm on the spot and now I'm thinking, oh my God, do I even use the handbrake?
Just imagine it in your head. You've pulled up, you've parallel parked, you've managed not to hit anything, you're in the right place by the curb,
Yeah.
you turn the engine off.
No. I put the handbrake on first and then I turn the engine off.
Yeah?
Yeah. And in fact, I often forget to take the handbrake off when I start to pull away.
Oh dear. You're probably not the person to be discussing with this. Stay tuned, Evie. There's something coming up for you. In the meantime, let's get to sport. 22-time Grand Slam champion Rafa Nadal has been ousted from the US Tennis Open after a shock fourth-round loss to American Frances Tiafoe. It was Nadal's first loss at a Grand Slam this year. The 24-year-old Tiafoe was overcome with emotion after his win, which came after more than 3.5 hours on court.
Even shaking his hand, I don't even know what I said to him. I was just it was such a blur, and I was already tearing, so I could barely see him and my team. Everyone's up, and it was just wild. My heart's going 1,000 miles an hour. I was so excited. I was like, let me sit down. I've never felt something like that in my life.
And we're joined now by sports reporter Felicity Reid. Well, 3.5 hours on court, I'd be lying on the floor on a coma. But massive ramifications for both players, yeah?
Yes, it was one of those true underdog upsets. Tiafoe was seeded 20 places below Nadal for this tournament. And for him, Nadal, this loss ended an impressive 22-match winning streak at Grand Slam tournaments. And he'd come up against Tiafoe before, 2 times before, and in those games, Tiafoe hadn't even managed to win a set against him. So to go down and, to a player like that, Nadal says he wasn't at his best. He came into this tournament with an abdominal injury. So for that ab injury, he'd sort of adjusted his serve, a little bit of a lower ball toss for this. So that hindered him a little bit in this as well. And it's not really known when he'll be back on court. His pregnant wife is in hospital, so after a car crash. So there was a few off-court distractions as well for him during this tournament.
Yeah, he seemed pretty pragmatic about the loss when he spoke. But this really opens up the men's side of the draw.
Indeed it does. And for Tiafoe, this has been called his biggest win of his career. Second time he's made it to a Grand Slam quarterfinal. The last time was 2019, and that was the Australian Open, and he lost to Nadal there. So there's only one player who would be a Grand Slam winner who's still in the draw at this point with the 8 players who are left. That's Marin Cilic, and he's currently involved in a bit of a battle with Carlos Alcaraz at the moment, so he even may be knocked out. And so, speaking after his game, Tiafoe was saying starts those conversations about the next generation of players again. Because, the big 3, Nadal was the last one still in the tournament for that. Djokovic not there because of his COVID status, and Federer not there because of those knee operations that he's been having.
So the new wave is upon us, maybe. Hey, let's move on to cricket. Long time coming. First Chapel-Hadley one-day game. Black Caps in Australia. It's already started in Cairns. What's happened so far?
Well, yeah, long time coming. 2020 was the last time this trophy was on the line, and that was just before COVID. So the last full series that we had was 2016, 2017. So, yeah, a bit of a long time coming here. Australia won the toss over there. They sent New Zealand into bat. After 10 overs, New Zealand was 29 for 1. That person who was out was Martin Govt, out to a great catch from Glenn Maxwell. And by saying that Kane Williamson is back in place of Finn Allen, and in the bowling department, it's Matt Henry in for Tim Southey.
So you'll be glued to it, no doubt. Thanks, Felicity. Felicity Reid there. Get ready for more cycleways. The government's announced $30 million of new funding that's to be spent on measures to make streets more people-friendly. The money will be split across 13 councils and is intended for walking and cycling projects up and down the country. Rosie Gordon and our cameraman Samuel Rillstone have the story.
Transport Minister Michael Wood getting on his bike today to accelerate changes to our streets, pumping the brakes at Newtown School in Wellington, where he announced $30 million for projects that aim to make walking and cycling safer.
We want our people and our kids to be safe when they walk outside the school gate or go down to the dairy or the local park. Yet over the last 10 years, 181 of our children in New Zealand have been seriously injured when they go out on our streets.
A new Waka Kotahi scheme called Streets for People aims to help turn that around. Money will go towards projects local authorities have already come up with.
It'll deliver 21 projects across 13 different local authorities up and down the country, and that'll make a real difference in their communities.
Waka Kotahi says in some cases the projects will result in less room on the roads for cars, with some lanes and car parks to be removed. But its urban mobility manager Catherine King doesn't yet know how many parks will go.
The projects haven't yet gone into the sort of design detail that we would need to be able to understand exactly how many spaces are being reallocated. But I can say that all the projects are focusing on opening up streets for people.
Funded changes include 2 trial projects in Auckland, cycleways and better pedestrian crossings at State Highway 35 in Gisborne, and a cycleway along part of State Highway 2 in Hawke's Bay. Part of that funding is a cash injection for Wellington Council to fast-track the route from Newtown to here in Island Bay. The project would likely join up cycleways in both suburbs. So what do locals make of the funding?
They've converted this whole area here, but I don't really see it being used very much.
I think that's cool. I don't really use scooters all too much, or bikes all too much and all that. So I don't think I would use it, but I think that's really good for the people.
I think it's crazy, really. I mean, we need more parks. I mean, it's a little bit hard to get around the city on your bike at the best of times. So taking away more parks is just, where are people going to park their cars? Do you know what I mean?
Newtown School Principal Nikki Reid says fast-tracking the Newtown Island Bay connection's a good move, but the school community is hesitant about the changes.
We have some in our Māori mission class that need to car in, and so it's a bit like save us some parks, same as save us some space to come to Kura.
Wellington Mayor Andy Foster didn't know how much money his council would be getting for the project, but suspected it would not be enough.
Undoubtedly the cost is likely to be higher than the money which is likely to be available for us from this particular allocation. I think it's a first little splash in the bucket, yeah.
The government doesn't plan on splashing any more cash into the scheme just yet.
$30 million, if that was all that we were doing across providing safe walking and cycling opportunities for people, it would not be enough. But we are investing that alongside a record program. Our government has lifted the investment in walking and cycling by more than 10 times what we had at the beginning of our term in government.
Waka Kotahi says there will be consultation with communities and says the 21 projects can be altered over time if they're not working. Projects are set to be finished by mid-2024.
Rosie Gordon and Samuel Rilstone with that story from Wellington, and the video will be on our webpage so that you can check it out. What do you think? 30 million on cycleways. Do you use them? How often? Do you want more of them, or you don't want a bar of them? Let us know. Text us on 2101. You can email us at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It seems the golden years are increasingly gold-plated, with a new report suggesting a couple retiring in a New Zealand city needs $750,000 in the bank if they want more than a no-frills existence. The Massey Uni Retirement Expenditure Guidelines sets out what's needed on top of super to get by. Even in the provinces, it calculates a couple will have to have saved close to $500,000 to fund a choices lifestyle. And pretty much no one living anywhere in New Zealand can get by on the state pension alone. The author and Massey Business School Associate Professor Claire Matthews joins us now. Kia ora, Claire. Depressing much?
Well, I would hope it's not depressing. I would hope that it's empowering and gives people something to work towards.
How many people realistically would be able to save that kind of money? Because when you think a two-person household, major city, $755,000.
But bear in mind, it's two people saving it, so they're only saving $377,000 each, which makes it sound much more accessible. But that's for the top end of the choices lifestyle, and maybe they decide that they don't want to spend at that level, so they can reduce it a little bit, maybe not as far as the no frills.
So what is a choices lifestyle? Can you tell us, do I get a trip overseas every year with the choices lifestyle, or do I just get a movie ticket and a flat white?
No, it's a little bit more than the movie ticket and the flat white. It's not necessarily an overseas trip every year. It depends exactly how you want to spend that money. But it means that you've got choices. That's what the title comes from. It's about having choices around how you spend your money. And if it's an overseas trip on a regular basis that you want, then you'll be able to afford that. But, yeah, it's a little bit more than the flat white and the,
About what is the weekly spend then for a choices couple in a metro area?
So the weekly spend is just under $1,600.
Right.
And then they're going to get $700 super to go towards that.
Yeah, so it's not an insignificant amount of money. Does that assume you own your own accommodation?
Okay, so it doesn't assume that you own your own accommodation, but what it does is it's based on what current retirees are spending. And our current retirees are of a generation, we're talking baby boomers and older, who generally have gone into retirement in their own home without a mortgage. So there aren't a lot of household home expenses in there because that reflects the current generation. One of the things we do note is that the coming generations, particularly Gen X, are likely to come into retirement either owing on their home loan still or possibly in rental accommodation. And the reality is that they are likely, in order to cover those housing costs, they are going to need larger sums.
Yeah, so they would potentially need more than the $755,000.
If they want to also be able to spend on those other things, yes.
Yeah. In terms of your research, is it right that you could actually find no one living anywhere in New Zealand who can survive on super alone, even on the no-frills end?
Oh, no, absolutely not. So the no frills is the second quintile. So there's people in the first quintile that spend less. And each year when these reports come out, I get contacted by people who assure me that they are living quite comfortably on New Zealand super.
Well, that is good to hear. Nice to talk to you, Claire. That's Claire Matthews, who's from the Massey Business School. She's an associate professor there and the author of this report telling us how much money we're going to need for retirement. I'm really interested in what you think of that. 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. $755,000 in the bank for choices if you're a couple living in a city. Can you get there? It is 25 minutes to 6. Kia amo tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is time for the business news. Let's stick with the theme. Ko taku hoa I nāianei, ko Nona Peltier. Nona joins us live in the studio. A skincare company in Australia, it's pleaded guilty to making unsubstantiated claims. Now, this is interesting. It's around sunscreen products.
That's right.
It's such a
it's
cloudy
confusing,
area.
isn't it? Yeah. And how do you know?
Well, it turns out you don't. So they're going to be tightening up the rules this week. There's going to be tighter regulations put in place regarding claims that are made. In this case, a company called Ego Pharmaceuticals, a case was brought against them after a complaint by the Consumer New Zealand had done an investigation and found that their claims about how much sun protection was offered in their products didn't measure up. And it's really difficult to know whether or not companies are testing, and because we get sun products from all over the world. And this was a particularly an Australian company. Their products were pulled from the distribution channel in 2019, so you can't necessarily buy them anyway. But later on this week, some new standards come into force, which hopefully will improve the situation for people.
Yeah, because as you know, it's a really hard choice to make, and it's hard to filter all that information. Let's move to the Reserve Bank of Australia. It's raised its benchmark interest rate and kind of in line with the expectations. What are the numbers?
Yeah, so their rate was another 50 basis points to 2.35%. That's what the market expected. And what was interesting, though, is that the Reserve Bank of Australia said that they're going to tackle inflation. They're committed to doing it. Their consumer price index hit 6% in the 12 months ended June, expecting to hit 7% soon. They're committed to moving their rate down to between 2 and 3%. They're going to do what it takes to do that, but they haven't set out a plan on how that's going to be, how big the hikes might end up being, or when they might take place. So, what did that mean to the markets?
Yep.
Not much. Hardly anything changed. Our dollar is still trading at 60.9 US cents, 89.6 Australian. We've come down a little bit against the British pence after the announcement of their new leader. Also, what's interesting is that the euro itself has sunk to a 20-year low on the concerns raised by the energy crisis there. It's something to keep an eye on. If you've got investments, pay attention to what's going on with Europe, because that has a flow-on effect for sure.
Don't go without giving us the number for the pound, Nona.
Didn't I give it to you?
No, you said it's down a bit.
Well, down a bit to 52.7. Well, you're paying attention, aren't you, Lisa?
Always, Nona. Yeah. Thank you. Nona Peltier there with business news. Now for a complete gear change, a seemingly simple video query about when to use a handbrake in an automatic car has blown up on social media. One odd bit of advice said you should go neutral, then handbrake, and then park. I'll say it again. Neutral, handbrake, park, and it's had millions of reactions. Here's a bit of the question and the response.
So this handbrake, you take it off when you want to drive, and then you put it on when you're done driving. But apparently everyone on TikTok is coming to tell me that I don't need to do that if my car is in park. But I always put the car in park, so I'm in like reverse or like drive or whatever, and then I put the car in park and I put the handbrake on. Is that not what you're meant to do? Can someone please explain this to me?
No, it's really not what you're supposed to do. So the easiest way I can explain it is when you put your car in park and that's it, and then put the handbrake on, the entire weight of the car is resting on the park brake rather than the handbrake, which means it's resting on the gearbox, and that f***s your gearbox up. What you're actually supposed to do, pop it in neutral, then put the handbrake on. That way the weight of the car is resting on the handbrake and not the gearbox. Then you pop it in park.
As you can imagine, everyone has piled in with their reckons, but here at Checkpoint we actually wanted a definitive answer. So who better to call than V8 supercar racing legend and commentator and safety campaigner Greg Murphy. Kia ora, Greg. Well, that was making my head hurt. What do you reckon?
Oh, I want to go to sleep. Give me some Panadol.
Well, what is the answer? What is the answer?
Well, the answer is people have clearly got way too much time on their hands. That's the answer. To want to get into a discussion around this, and the amount of reaction to it is nothing short of incredible. It's ridiculous. The short answer is do whatever you like. It's not doing anything in any order is not going to affect anything to do with your car mechanically. What I do is I put it in park and put the handbrake on, and I've never had a car fail because of it. So anyone that says that it's doing damage and it's putting weight on your gearbox, they are, I don't think, experts, and just do it the way that everyone that I've ever known does it, by putting your car into park and put the handbrake on, and both of them should be on when your car is stationary. So the theory that you are applying some significant amount of weight to your gearbox is a load of tosh, is what you're saying. Absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish. If it was that bad, there'd be warnings, and there is no warnings. So that's just that's absolute rubbish. I mean, automatic gearboxes should not be put into park while the vehicle is moving. Of course, you should be stopped and put on the brake and put into park, and then just put your handbrake on. It's not going to do any damage or cause any issues to your vehicle by doing that. So, yeah, I'm just blown away that it's has had such a reaction, to be honest.
Well, Greg, I suppose that raises a question then about what people are learning when they drive and in driver's ed these days.
People aren't learning, and that's the problem, and that's why we in this country have such a significant issue and an ongoing one, and such debate as well. So, the fact of it is, when we get our driver's licence, we are not learning to be safe drivers. We're not learning about the physics, dynamics, the intricacies of a motor vehicle. We're not learning to be aware. We're just getting a piece of plastic that gives us the right to drive on the road. So there's many more things that you should be concerned about and worried about than your handbrake being on and if it's in park or not. One of the big issues we've got these days with automatic vehicles is that they've become pretty much the norm. Everyone drives one. And what it's done is allowed everyone to have a free hand, because we're not changing gears anymore. We're not having to press the clutch and move the gear lever whenever we come to a stop or driving forward or going around corners. So, that's one thing, if anything else, out of all this. If we're talking automatic gearboxes, when you've got that free hand, do not pick up your phone and start being distracted while driving. Let's focus on that, and that will actually save lives, whereas handbrakes and arguments around if you should be in park or not are not going to save anyone's life.
Really appreciate your time, Greg. Thanks for joining us. That is Greg Murphy there. I really want to hear from you on this one. 2101 on text. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Apparently, doesn't matter what order you do it, the handbrake and the park and all the rest of it. As he says, just be stationary when you put it into park. I'm also interested to know, can you drive a manual car, or have you only ever learnt or driven an automatic? Because Greg reckons that's causing some issues as well. It is 17 minutes to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaro. Send us your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Could be youth, crime, could be how much you need for retirement, could be about the handbrake. 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to go to Evie now with the headlines and her handbrake technique. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
Kia ora, Lisa. A defence lawyer at the political donations trial has told the court that his client, Jung Yi-kun, didn't conceal his identity as alleged by the Crown. 7 people are defending charges in the High Court in Auckland laid by the Serious Fraud Office. It's alleged that sham donations were put forward by insiders of the National and Labour parties to disguise Mr Jung's identity. Hawke's Bay Police say a burnt-out car near Havelock North was so damaged they didn't notice a body was inside until an examination took place 2 days later. Several residents who walked past the wreck also said they were surprised to hear about the human remains. A roofing company has been fined $25,000 and ordered to pay $40,000 in reparations after a 14-year-old roofer was seriously injured in Hawke's Bay. The teenager fell 8 metres through a skylight. An investigation found that the worker had been told not to walk on skylights as they were brittle, but WorkSafe says the advice didn't go far enough. Waka Kotahi says it's providing councils with $30 million of funding for walking and cycling projects. It says it will inevitably result in less space for cars, but that the projects can be reviewed over time if they're not working. And people living in Auckland northwards are being asked to report sightings of Hector's dolphins after one was spotted in Mahudangi Harbour, well north of its usual habitat. Those are the headlines. No new crashes, delays or closures to report in traffic, so that's good. I'll have more news and weather for you at 6.
Kia ora rā e hoa. Let's get to some of your feedback. A lot of it coming in on cycleways, the $30 million spend the government has announced. Charles says, I have a family car and 2 classic cars, so a bit of a petrol head. Since Christchurch City has increased its cycle network, my bicycle has become my number 1 vehicle around town. Absolutely brilliant, says Charles. Safe and well-designed routes, a real game changer for this family and the city. Adam reckons more cycleways. Yes, please, bring it on. But this one in says it depends on how it's done. What we need is to keep everyone safe, and that means separate speed corridors. For example, e-bikes and parents with prams need different routes. Do keep the feedback coming, 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Businesses are among the 21 groups which will host refugees under the new community sponsorship scheme. The extended pilot will welcome 150 refugees over 3 years. Jill Bonnet has the story.
When Lorna Johnson saw the government's refugee sponsorship programme was being renewed, she knew she wanted to get involved.
All I did was just put a note on my personal Facebook to say, look, I'm really wanting to do this. Is anybody keen to do it with me?
Lorna Johnson was already part of a trust that helps resettle and reunify refugee families, so she got a good response. Now a group of 7 are getting ready to welcome their first sponsored refugee family in Palmerston North.
I just know how important it is for people to get a good start when they come to New Zealand, to have support, to be linked into services, to make friends, to feel welcomed. And I really want to be able to provide a really good experience for a family that needs to be resettled.
Community sponsors are matched with a refugee before they come to New Zealand, or they can nominate refugees they want to bring in. A smaller pilot scheme in 2018 welcomed families, including some from war-torn Syria. The National Manager of Host, which is leading the new programme, Birgit Grafrend-Watongwa, says it's proved very popular.
We've been blown away by the interest over the last few months, and that's been really amazing. And seeing that wide range of organisations, communities across the country, not just in the cities, but also in smaller regions, coming on board and wanting to help in a humanitarian way to resettle refugees.
Individuals can also join an existing group to help refugees find jobs and homes, enrol with schools and doctors, and make new friends.
We have faith-based organisations, we have businesses, we have ethnic background communities, we have refugee-led organisations, and they are all across the country as well.
The 150 refugees are in addition to the 1,500 quota refugees and have to meet different criteria. They include being under 45, understanding basic English and having either work skills or a tertiary education. The first community-sponsored refugees are expected to arrive early next year.
In Havelock North, police have mistaken human remains in a burnt-out car for those of a sheep. The car was sitting by a popular walking site and many people would have passed by without knowing a body was hiding inside. Our Hawke's Bay reporter Tom Kitchen has more.
River Road is a popular spot near Havelock North. Many walkers and bikers come by to enjoy the Hawke's Bay trails between the vineyards and Tukituki River in the shadow of Tamata Peak. But it's also a popular site to dump rubbish, and burned out cars are a common occurrence, so much so people walking by often don't give them much thought. But the one parked here at the weekend had something hiding in it. Linda Jacobson and her daughter Melissa often walk their dogs along River Road. Melissa was down here on Saturday. She saw the car and took a glance from 2 metres away.
It was parked there. There was a sticker on the boot that said police had been down, so don't report it again. They're aware of it.
She remembers what it looked like.
It was just white, burned out, all the seals around the doors and all the moulding, nothing left on the bumpers or anything like that. Just, no glass. Just you could see right through.
Linda says they thought about going right up to the car.
We started to sort of go over close, and then I jokingly said to my daughter, I don't think I want to look inside just in case there's a body or something like that.
On Sunday, the car hadn't moved, but Melissa says the next day was a different story.
Came back yesterday, Monday, and then the cops were there, and they finally told us after we were on our walk that we had to clear out of the car park and it was now a crime scene.
Police say they were told about the vehicle around 10 a.m. on Saturday morning, but then they didn't see the body, as this statement explains.
Staff attended, and due to the condition of the vehicle and debris from the fire, did not immediately identify that human remains were in the cabin of the car. A subsequent inspection of the vehicle revealed suspected human remains.
They say the investigation's still in the very early stages. A post-mortem is expected to be carried out today, which it's hoped will help identify the person who died.
Tom Kitchen reporting there. A court has heard Gloriavale founder Hopeful Christian told a father who had just buried his daughter that he could take comfort from the fact she wouldn't be molested. Clem Reedy says sexual offending was prevalent at the Christian community and its leaders used their power to cover it up. Jean Edwards reports from the Employment Court hearing in Christchurch.
Clem Reedy says he was shaken by the attitude of Hopeful Christian to the death of his daughter Prayer in an isolation room at Gloriavale.
After we buried her, Hopeful came up to me and said, in a serious comment, that I could take comfort in the fact that she now would not be sexually molested by anybody in the community.
The father of 13 was convicted of beating Prayer and her sister Connie over a period of 13 years, but he told the court it was a turning point in his life. Mr Reedy isn't convinced Gloriavale is a safe place for children. He told the court there was a sexual culture of relief, not restraint, and women and girls were always blamed and punished for misbehaviour.
This means the leaders will decide the girl led the male astray. The girl is totally to blame. She must be a harlot, a whore. These are the words they use to describe the girls who complain.
Mr Reedy says he felt so angry he wanted to expose the leaders who didn't act on concerns because of the risk to their reputations. He says he wasn't aware just how prevalent sexual offending was until he left Gloriavale for 18 months.
I was hit with an avalanche of facts exposing this offending and realised that those who held all the power in the community had used their position to cover up their own and their children's offending.
Gloriavale's barrister told the court the leaders do not condone sexual offending and have taken steps to address it. 6 former Gloriavale women want the Employment Court to rule they were employees, not volunteers. Clem Reedy says women are groomed from birth to work hard, marry, give their husbands unlimited sex and become mothers of many children.
The females from birth are conditioned to be hardworking and indoctrinated to be cheap, sweatshop-style labour, underpinning the whole financial structure of the community.
His wife Sharon Reedy told the court she signed Gloriavale documents without independent legal advice and a shepherd had control of her bank account.
I understood that they could access and draw their money out of the account I opened, and I had no control over the money at all.
Gloriavale's leaders strongly contest the women's claims and deny they were ever employees.
It's 6 minutes to 6. Kia mau tunu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're going to get to some of your feedback now because it is flooding in on the old handbrake situation and what sequence you should use when putting on the handbrake in an automatic vehicle. We were talking to Greg Murphy before and basically in summary he says it's a load of bollocks. You can do it in any order you want. This person says I am lazy and don't bother putting the handbrake on at all most of the time. Oh, a risk taker. Another person says Greg Murphy, brilliant. Please think about a career in politics, i.e. Prime Minister. Someone else says they don't have a handbrake in their car. Ruben in Mechanics got in touch, has been a mechanic for 30 years, never seen a gearbox fail for putting in park, and let alone before the handbrake is applied, says Ruben, so there you have it. And this person says, finally someone saying publicly how it is. People have no clue how to drive an Aotearoa as they have never learnt anything about driving a car. Now, someone here is game, sticking their neck out, saying, my question is, what is neutral for in an automatic car? I've never used it. Well, you're asking for trouble. 2101. What is neutral for in an automatic car? Let us know your thoughts. A short, sharp, wintry blast has brought snow to the south, turning Dunedin's roads into ice rinks, causing disruption to schools and giving farmers a headache. But for some, it was a chance for adventure in a springtime snow day. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown donned the hat and gloves for this story.
First came the rain, then the hail, then the snow. As the residents of Dunedin awoke this morning, especially its youngest, all ears tuned to the news to see what came next.
In Dunedin, the snow has stopped falling, but ice on the roads has seen schools starting later.
And just like that, a late start to school and daycare gave youngsters a chance to enjoy the last throes of winter. Louise Mearns and her 4-year-old son Ethan took the trip across town from Otago Peninsula to halfway bush to find some snow worth playing in.
We had snow on our deck and a bit of snow on the grass outside, so that's pretty unusual for out there. But there's definitely a slightly thicker covering in here.
And for Ethan, it was his first experience with snow, so he made the most of it.
What have you been doing this morning?
Making a snowman.
Making a snowman, wow. A good one?
Yeah.
Yeah. And is this your first time playing in snow?
Yeah.
What do you think of the snow?
It's great.
All schools in the city started late, with plenty of kids dusting off the sleds and ski boots for some morning fun. But it wasn't all laughs for everyone. The treacherous conditions last night meant many people abandoned their vehicles and started walking. Taieri Road still looked like an improvised car park this morning, and some didn't make the right call not to drive. Among those counting the damage was Korba Sarfontaine.
We were sleeping, heard a knock on the door, and then turns out someone had smashed into the back of my vehicle here, and they did a runner.
Mr. Sarfontaine says he's also had to join those taking the day off.
Absolutely, I'd be working right now, so it's taking me away from my day's work here. I've got to spend the day sorting a car out. Not ideal.
He says the roads were dangerous last night.
Coming up this road, people were skidding all around it. You could hear the cars skidding as they come up.
And the spring snow has also caused issues for some farmers in the south. While it could have been worse had it arrived a week or two later, for those lambing early, it's caused headaches. Southland farmer Dean Rabbage says he's been out putting woolen covers on his lambs in exposed places.
So you chuck them on and 95% survival rate, pretty good. They just keep the lamb nice and warm and helps them conserve energy to get up and get a feed. And once that's happened, they're good to go.
But the Met Service says some good news may be in store, as, while the cold temperatures remain, sunny skies may take the place of snow.
And that was Timothy Brown. Now, you've got a lot of thoughts on a lot of issues tonight, so let's get to some of them, starting with retirement savings. This was the Massey study that said you need about $755,000 if you're two people living in a metro area to have a choices retirement, and that is on top of your state pension. This listener says, holy moly, need to have two good frilly incomes to save the frills retirement lifestyle, ! Mike, on the other hand, says as a retired single bloke in Greymouth, I can live comfortably, no frills life, on $2,500 a month. And another one in a similar vein, absolute nonsense. I live very well indeed, just on my super, says Alan from Golden Bay. You're in a spectacular part of the world, Alan. On the subject of handbrakes, this person says, how epic was Greg Murphy's interview in a world where people overthink and get up in arms about ridiculous stuff? He just cut through the crap and smashed out the facts. Go Murph. Cheers, Simon. Someone else says, been driving an EV for 3 years, haven't used a handbrake for once. Jenny, 75, and drives a new manual sports model car. Oh, I wonder what kind. Jenny says, greater control than an automatic and goes like the wind. You do know what the speed limit is, don't you, Jenny? And this very helpful listener says, youths won't steal your car if it has a manual gearbox. Few young people know how to drive them. Likewise, they seem to have a problem hot wiring electric or hybrid cars. Someone else says, 74, been gifted an EV by my kids. Bugger the handbrake, park scenario. I am loving the backing camera. Never had one before. Can now exit my driveway without taking out visually challenged boomers.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening. Kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The Police Minister won't set a target to measure the success of a program to support youth offenders. The government has announced a $53 million package extending education and employment programs to thousands of young Aucklanders. Speaking to Checkpoint, Chris Hipkins wouldn't set a target, saying the ultimate goal is to get kids engaged in something constructive.
It's not about reducing prosecutions, it's about reducing offending. I want to get these kids off the street, into school, into education, into training, into employment, so that they're not getting into trouble in the first place. That's got to be the goal. I'm not going to put a hard and fast number on it.
The opposition has criticised the package as window dressing, saying it's ram raid and burglary victims who need more support. It's been revealed that Hawke's Bay Police didn't realise a body was in a burned-out car near Havelock North until 2 days after they were told about the wreckage. Tom Kitchen has more.
The police were first told about the burned-out wreck parked by the Tuki River on Saturday morning. The area is popular for walking and cycling, and residents say a police sticker was on the car saying officers had seen it, so there was no need to report it. But it wasn't until an inspection on Monday that police realised they were dealing with a body inside the vehicle. They say the investigation is in the early stages and a post-mortem is expected to be done on the remains today.
A Gloriavale father has told a court the Christian community's leaders used their powerful position to cover up sexual offending. Clem Reddy says Gloriavale's founder, Hopeful Christian, told him he could take comfort from the fact his dead daughter wouldn't be molested. Mr Reddy told an employment court hearing he wasn't aware how prevalent sex offending was until he left Gloriavale for 18 months.
I was hit with an avalanche of facts exposing this offending and realised that those who held all the power in the community had used their position to cover up their own and their children's offending.
Gloriavale's barrister told the court the community's leaders don't condone sexual offending and have taken steps to address it. The defence lawyer for a businessman at the centre of a political donations trial has told a court his client didn't conceal his identity, as the Crown alleges. 7 people are defending charges laid by the Serious Fraud Office in the High Court at Auckland. The Crown claims 3 large donations to National and Labour were split to avoid triggering the disclosure limit and to keep the public in the dark about the identity of the donor, businessman Jung Iquin. Mr Jung's lawyer, Blair Kewen, told the court he hadn't engaged in deceitful behaviour and didn't conceal his identity. The Crown closed its case yesterday. Canadian police have found the body of Damien Sanderson, one of 2 brothers wanted for a mass stabbing that killed 10 people and wounded 18 others in Saskatchewan on Sunday. The BBC's Naomi Iqbal reports.
This is one of the worst acts of violence in Canada's recent history. People here are on edge. Every few minutes, a piercing alert rings out from mobile phones, warning people to take care as the hunt continues for one of the suspects, Miles Sanderson. He and his brother Damien Sanderson are accused of stabbing 10 people to death and injuring 18 others in locations across the province of Saskatchewan. Damien Sanderson's body was found in James Smith Cree Nation, an Indigenous community where most of the victims lived. The Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has described what happened as shocking and heartbreaking. He says the government is ready to help in any way it can.
Waka Kotahi says new funding for walking and cycling projects will inevitably result in less space for cars. The government's providing $30 million for 21 council projects to make walking and cycling safer and more appealing. Waka Kotahi Urban Mobility Manager Catherine King says in some cases lanes and car parks will be removed, but it's not clear yet how many will go.
Projects haven't yet gone into the sort of design detail that we would need to be able to understand exactly how many spaces are being reallocated. But I can say that all the projects are focusing on opening up streets for people.
The projects are set to be completed by mid-2024. Waka Kotahi says they can be altered over time if they're not working. A roofing company has been fined $25,000 and ordered to pay $40,000 in reparations after a 14-year-old roofer fell 8 metres through a skylight. An investigation found that the worker had been told not to walk on skylights as they were brittle, but WorkSafe says the advice didn't go far enough. The teenager was seriously injured when he fell through the skylight onto a concrete floor while working for Ironhide Roofing Limited, which was sentenced today in the Napier District Court. People under 15 are also not allowed to work on a construction site. People in Northland and Auckland are being urged to report sightings of Hector's dolphins after one was spotted well north of its usual home waters. Department of Conservation Marine Technical Advisor Christina Hillock says a Hector's dolphin was spotted in Mahurangi Harbour on Friday, while a second sighting occurred near Whangade's Onadahi Beach and a third up the far end of the Whangade River. Ms Hillock says it's unusual to see Hector's dolphins this far north on the east coast of the the North Island. Hector's dolphins are classified as nationally vulnerable, with an estimated population of 15,700. And in sport, New Zealand are 2 for 91 in the 23rd over in the opening Chapel Hadley One-Day Cricket International against Australia in Cairns. The Black Caps have never won a one-day series in Australia, and their last one-day win there was 13 years ago. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, we celebrate the BBC's 100th birthday with band Public Service Broadcasting in concert at the Royal Albert Hall, while the mainly Marxist Brian Roper wonders what hope lies with the proletariat. Where's the next workers' movement going to come from? Or have we all given our individual selves over to social media? On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7.
This is the beginning of a new era for mankind.
On RNZ National.
You're back on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. From Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty, mainly fine. Isolated showers are possible for Northland. From Waitomo to Horowhenua, including Taumaru Nui and Taupo, fine today, partly cloudy tomorrow with a few showers. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, also Taihape, Kapiti and Wellington. Showers clearing this evening, fine tomorrow, apart from occasional afternoon or evening showers for Taihape and Hawke's Bay. Fine for Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, a few showers developing tomorrow afternoon and evening south of Ashburton. Bulla and Westland, fine. Isolated showers developing north of the glaciers this afternoon and they're clearing tomorrow evening. Mainly fine for Otago. Showers in Clutha spreading elsewhere tomorrow afternoon. The snow level rises to 700 metres. Southland and Fiordland, showers turning to rain for a time tomorrow morning. The snow level is lifting to 700 metres, and for Re Kohu, the Chatham Islands, showers. The time is coming up to 8 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Kia ora rā, Evie. No mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. One of the suspects in a grisly mass stabbing in Saskatchewan, Canada, that left 10 dead and 18 injured has been found dead. Police say Damien Sanderson's injuries were not believed to be self-inflicted. His brother Miles Sanderson is still on the run, and police have warned residents to remain vigilant as the manhunt continues. CNN's Paula Newton has more.
Police say the stabbing rampage began in the pre-dawn hours Sunday in an Indigenous community in central Saskatchewan. At 5:40 a.m. Central Time Sunday morning and for several minutes afterward, police say they received reports of multiple stabbings in several locations in James Smith Cree Nation. By 7:12 a.m., Saskatchewan law enforcement issued a dangerous persons alert telling residents to shelter in place. Later that hour, they identified the suspects as brothers Damien Sanderson and Miles Sanderson. By 8:30 a.m., the manhunt was extended by hundreds of miles. And at 9:45 a.m., police alerted that there was at least one stabbing victim in the neighboring village of Weldon and that some victims were randomly attacked.
I was thinking that could have been me. They could have killed me. I don't know why they did this. They took innocent people's lives. They shattered this community.
And then by 12:07 p.m. in Regina, Saskatchewan, a 3.5-hour drive away, police say they had a credible tip that the suspects were in the city driving a black Nissan Rogue. But then the trail goes cold. Police appeal to the public once again and late Monday announced that Damien Sanderson has been found dead, but Miles Sanderson is still at large.
I think the most recent reliable information we have says that he is in Regina or was in Regina. The most recent. That most recent information is a day old. We acknowledge that, but we have nothing that can tell us differently.
Crucially, police also say Damien Sanderson's wounds were not believed to be self-inflicted, and his body was found in the community of James Smith Cree Nation, the scene of the first attacks. Despite an expanded search, Miles Sanderson remains on the run. Police are telling all residents in Saskatchewan to remain vigilant and that the suspect is dangerous and has an extensive criminal record. The tight-knit Indigenous community is devastated by these vicious attacks that has now shattered so many lives.
It affects everybody from James Smith. Whether you're, they're all part of family. You know, I have a niece was killed, first cousin was killed. You know, so how do you speak on that? How do you respond?
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said his government is marshalling resources to the communities, but conceded how unnerving this savage crime has been.
Sadly, over these past years, tragedies like these have become all too commonplace. Saskatchewanians and Canadians will do what we always do in times of difficulty and anguish. We'll be there for each other.
And the Canadian Prime Minister ending that report from CNN. The UK has a new Prime Minister. Liz Truss has won the Conservative Party leadership race and will be sworn in tomorrow. Promising to deliver, the former Foreign Minister takes over in one of the most challenging and unsettling times, with rising power bills during a cost of living crisis and the war in Ukraine. The BBC's Chris Mason reports.
Liz Truss arrived as Foreign Secretary and would leave as tomorrow's Prime Minister. The final act of the contest to replace Boris Johnson, the outcome. Inside, an expectant crowd after a long campaign awaits the candidates.
Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss.
And then, the result.
I give notice that Liz Truss is elected as the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party.
The words to follow her winning in the hands of her husband, a clear victory, but not a landslide.
Thank you for putting your faith in me to lead our great Conservative Party, the greatest political party on earth. I will deliver a bold plan to cut taxes and grow our economy. I will deliver on the energy crisis, dealing with people's energy bills, but also dealing with the long-term issues we have on energy supply.
And she concluded with the mantra her campaign began with.
We will deliver, we will deliver, we will deliver. And we will deliver a great victory for the Conservative Party in 2024. Thank you. Thank you.
Elation, smiles and success, the crowning moment of her political career. Liz Truss will be Prime Minister tomorrow and then confronted by an in-tray from hell. The question for her party and for the country, will she be up to it?
I think she'll be an absolutely fantastic Prime Minister. So, yeah, I'm really, really pleased.
Bluntly, it's a tough time, isn't it, to become Prime Minister?
We have some huge challenges. We have still the COVID backlog situation to deal with, the economic shocks that we're going through now, in part because of our stance we've taken on Ukraine, and many other challenges.
What do you say to our viewers who says, look, the razzmatazz is all fine, but when are we going to get this detail on energy? Because people are looking at their bills and they're frightened.
Well, look, I think as we've just seen, Liz Truss in her acceptance speech made it clear she wants to get that done. She wants to deliver on that quickly, as she said, I think, on the BBC even yesterday. So I think people will see fairly quickly, actually, a package of measures that she wants to put forward.
The main opposition parties here are chipper. Today's focus is on a new government, but the Liberal Democrats are revitalised, the SNP remain dominant in Scotland, and Labour are ahead in the polls.
Well, we've heard far more from the latest Prime Minister about cuts to corporation tax over the summer than we have about the cost of living crisis, the single most important thing that's bearing down on so many millions of households.
The UK is in probably the worst and most acute crisis of our lifetimes, so the responsibility on her, because she holds the powers and the resources needed to respond to this crisis, is huge.
No plan to deal with the rising energy bills, the rocketing food bills, the crisis of the NHS, and that's deeply alarming.
The challenges ahead, huge. The challenges now, rather more practical. Things don't get any bigger at Westminster than when the removal vans turn up in Downing Street. Tomorrow, it'll be Liz Truss's turn, swapping her party headquarters for number 10.
And it's 6:15. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A court in Russia has sentenced a former defence journalist to more than 20 years in prison. Urvan Safronov was arrested 2 years ago, accused of passing on state secrets. Earlier, another Russian court revoked the print licence of a prominent independent newspaper. The United Nations is calling the decision another blow to the independence of Russian media, as the BBC's Steve Rosenberg reports.
In Moscow today, two events provided a disturbing answer to the question, in which direction is Russia heading? At the Moscow City Court, a judge declared former journalist Ivan Safronov guilty of treason and sentenced him to 22 years in a high-security prison. In the courtroom, his supporters applauded him and shouted freedom. Mr. Safronov had written on military issues and had been accused of disclosing secrets to Western agents. But leaked court documents appeared to show that the information in question was freely accessible on the internet. Earlier, a different Moscow court revoked the print licence of Russia's most respected independent newspaper. It was former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev who'd helped establish Novaya Gazeta 3 decades ago. It gained a reputation for courageous investigative journalism. Today, just 2 days after Mr. Gorbachev's funeral, the paper lost its licence. Its editor-in-chief, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate Dmitry Muratov, called it a political hit job.
Elective surgeries for thousands of patients in Australia have been deferred or put on hold in recent years as hospitals grapple with COVID cases and staff shortages. In Queensland, almost 58,000 people are on waiting lists for elective surgery. Doctors are worried it's making patients more reliant on pain medication, while others are dipping into their savings to pay for private care. The ABC's Meg Bolton reports.
Noosa resident Jane Granger spent 3 years on a public hospital waiting list for hip surgery.
Just putting my shoes and socks on, I was in absolute agony.
In that time, 3 centimetres of her bone wore away.
I was walking completely lopsided. Had the hip replacement been done when it should have been done, none of that would have occurred. I was told that the surgery had now become very complex.
Her operation was cancelled 3 times between December and April this year as Queensland hospitals grappled with rising COVID infections.
I mean, I got to a very, very low point where life was just, sometimes I just thought, I can't go on anymore. I just can't keep doing this, you know.
The Sunshine Coast Hospital and Health Service, which covers Noosa, has the worst elective surgery waiting times in the state. Between April and June this year, 40.1% of patients were treated after clinically recommended times, followed closely by Townsville and Central Queensland. The president of the Sunshine Coast Local Medical Association, Dr. Roger Faint, says GPs are watching their patients deteriorate as they wait.
I've got a tradie whose basically shoulder is, literally falling apart.
He says some patients are paying thousands of dollars to get treated in the private system.
Now, out-of-pocket costs for spinal surgery are $10,000, $15,000 minimum. So they're using their superannuation, which you can obviously access, your life savings. Who knows what they'll be doing in 5 years' time? They're probably going to be living on the pension because they've used all their money they've saved for their whole working life for their back surgery.
Others are taking more medication to manage their conditions.
So you try and help them out and say, well, let's give you a narcotic just to get you through this tough time. And then it becomes that they become addicted and they want more. And then you're stuck with somebody who doesn't understand that you can't give them more.
The president of the Queensland branch of the Australian Medical Association is Dr. Maria Bolton.
If the hospital system isn't hitting those timeframes, then there is something wrong with the system. We need all the resources we can get to ensure that we get through those wait lists, because the thing is that diseases don't wait. Patients will continue to go on those wait lists, and those wait lists are just going to get longer.
In a statement, Queensland's Health Minister Yvette Darth says there was an almost 40% increase in elective surgeries between April and June this year compared with the previous quarter. And she says to complete almost 32,500 surgeries in that time, when COVID and flu cases were also taking a toll, is an outstanding effort.
And that report was from the ABC. Voters in Chile have overwhelmingly rejected a new constitution that would have transformed the country's social and economic structure. It was meant to replace the constitution imposed by the military in 1980, but the changes have been seen as too radical, promising changes they feel the country can't afford. The BBC's Katie Watson has more.
It was an overwhelming turnout and an overwhelming rejection by Chileans of a new constitution billed as being one of the world's most progressive. And it's a crushing defeat for President Gabriel Boric, who's thrown all of his efforts into supporting a rewriting of the constitution. Sunday's vote happened because of this. Widespread protests in 2019 that started over a hike in subway fares, but grew to encompass broader demands for better access to things like education, healthcare and pensions. It took everyone by surprise. Chile has long been thought of as one of the region's most prosperous and stable countries, but that masked deep inequalities. Top of protesters' demands was to rip up the dictatorship-era constitution and replace it with something more progressive, more inclusive. In 2020, nearly 80% of Chileans agreed they wanted a new constitution. The draft, drawn up by a constitutional assembly, was broad in scope, encompassing better access to education and healthcare, a recognition of indigenous rights and climate issues. Voting on Sunday was obligatory. 15 million Chileans were eligible to cast their vote, and turnout was high.
I hope that we get a state that benefits us all Chileans, better pensions, health. This system that was established during the dictatorship has not been good enough to respond to all the needs of the people, only to a few. So I hope for a new model that does respond to all the needs of Chile.
I find it very exciting because Chile woke up. It is what we needed to be united, because the process we were living in divided us all. It was a difficult process where they did not respect our decisions.
In the end, though, this was not the text that everyone could agree on. There was criticism over some of the proposals and disagreements over the constituents elected to draft it. President Boric spoke to the nation shortly after the results came through, promising not to give up.
And to the US now. In the South, a push is on for some schools to be renamed to remove the celebration of former Confederate leaders linked to racial inequality. But as CNN's Nadia Romero reports, it's not as straightforward as you might think.
A new school year brings new hope in the years-long fight to change a trio of names that loom over this building and two others in Montgomery, Alabama. Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis, and Sidney Lanier High Schools. Melvin Brown grew up in Robert E. Lee's hometown. Today, he is the superintendent of schools. Just weeks into his tenure, Brown is determined to see the names go.
We need to be honest about it.
So what do you say to those who believe you're trying to erase history
Not at
and
all.
erase our heritage?
The gentleman for whom this building is constructed and named was a brilliant military tactician. At the same time, he was a slaver. At the same time, he led a rebellion against his own country.
The Montgomery-based Equal Justice Initiative, a nonprofit with the mission of challenging racial and economic injustice, says Lee High was named in 1954 as retaliation to Brown versus Board of Education, ending separate but equal in U.S. schools. Jefferson Davis High, named in 1968, right after integration. As of 2021, EJI identifying more than 240 schools in 19 states named in honor of Confederate leaders.
I can't breathe.
In response to George Floyd's murder, school districts across the South and beyond pledged to rename schools named after Confederate leaders. In Atlanta, Forest Hills Academy, named after a Confederate general and one of the founders of the Ku Klux Klan, Nathan Bedford Forrest, is now Hank Aaron New Beginnings Academy. In Baton Rouge, Lee Magnet School, renamed Liberty Magnet School. But in Montgomery, Alabama, where 3 public high schools have at least an 80% black student population, Confederate-named schools still remain.
What I see here.
But school board member Lisa Keith argued changing the names would be more divisive than helpful.
My perception of this whole thing is it has divided us as a board, and it has divided us as a city.
Despite Keith's objection, the school board had enough votes to change the names of all 3 schools in July 2020. But more than 2 years later, not much has happened.
We got a lot of work to do, though.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
One of the major obstacles slowing them down is the Alabama Memorial Preservation Act, signed in 2017 by Governor Kay Ivey. Will says if they change the school names without getting state approval, they could face steep fines.
There are funds that have been collected to pay those fines.
And more money would be needed to change everything from signage to letterheads to uniforms, a price tag the school district hasn't determined. But as Superintendent Brown sees it,
there's no price that is too steep for us to help kids in their well-being.
CNN's Nadia Romero there. In Europe, tourism has seen a resurgence as summer visitors returned in their thousands after COVID restrictions were lifted. Festivals have also returned, and now the Italian city of Venice is seeing a revival of cultural life. The BBC's Tim Allmond reports.
Venice always looks pretty spectacular, but it rarely looks much more spectacular than this. A procession of boats filling up the Grand Canal for the annual historic regatta. Around 300 people taking part in a tradition that dates back centuries. But there's something a little different about this year's event. The spectators have returned. For the first time since COVID, the full regatta is taking place, and not a moment too soon. Last year we still came, but we couldn't stay because there was a ban due to COVID, said this man. Instead, this year we are much freer, and so we have more fun.
And now we stay here in Venice in the important day, so it's very important to stay here, and I'm very happy to hear.
It was good. It was exciting. You could see that people were passionate, said this man. For the last 3 years, it hasn't been done, so you could see the people who were participating. They had a lot of emotions. This was the regatta last year. Plenty of boats, but a limited number of people watching. With the end of COVID restrictions, the city can enjoy the event in full. A spectacle like no other, in a place like no other.
And some more of your feedback before we head off on the issue of youth crime, and the government sort of tagging 53 million today to go toward programs to stop youth crime. This person says no amount of money is going to stop crime. Another says youth offending from the government perspective is a joke. These young people don't want education. Get Minister Hipkins to focus on the parents. Another listener says, I had a student referred by the Ministry of Education who was one of those involved in ram raids. Info shared 60% of those ram raiders in alternative education already. No wraparound services, no police, no OT. Stuart has got in touch and says he works in insurance and am a Labour voter. However, I cannot see why it is the police's role to advise businesses on how to secure their property. That's an entire industry that does that already. Another suggestion, if bollards are taking too long, why not put planter boxes full of soil and plants in place instead? Easy and quickly placed and can be removed at a later date. On Northlands Road. Now, this is State Highway 1, so it is damaged at the Mongamoka Gorge. Flood damage could be months before it opens. Ken says we Northlanders are totally ripped off by Waka Kotahi, and to add insult to injury, we have to pay a toll, soon to double, to travel to and from Auckland. No tolls if you live south of Auckland, he says. And on the subject of cycleways, investment in making streets for people, not just for cars, is long overdue, says this person, towards making our cities better places to live and grow up in. I'm a boomer and had the privilege of being able to safely cycle to school. Not possible for many kids today. Another person reckons Great South Road in Auckland would be wonderful for a cycleway. They would cycle to work if it would be in there. Cycleways are great, this person says, but shouldn't Wellington be spending on fixing water pipes and landslips first? On the handbrake, Igor says neutral allows you to rev your engine at the lights. Stop it, Igor, you're going to get us in trouble. The Late News team's going to keep you updated throughout the night. That's about all we've got time for. If you missed anything, check us out on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi o Pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. First up dines out with Auckland's mayoral candidates, starting off with kebabs with Craig Lord. 5 a.m, bit early for kebabs. Don't choke on your cereal. Tune in for that one, and we'll be back same time in the evening.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The Police Minister says the aim of a new youth offenders program is to engage children in something constructive, such as education or training. A new report suggests a couple retiring in a city needs $750,000 in the bank if they want to live comfortably. Rescuers in China's southwest are searching for survivors